Hello, hello, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. We're going to spend a little bit of a kitchen day today. I'm going to show you that it is in fact possible to make all of the things out of goat's milk that you can make with cow's milk, including butter. The one thing about goat's milk is that it is naturally homogeneous, so you do need, or you really should, have a cream separator in order to separate the cream from the skim in order to get the cream to make the butter. But before we get into today's festivities, I need to point out that this video is part of a collaboration because it turns out June is dairy month. So a few different channels, actually quite a few, I think there's 35 channels that are part of this collaboration, have all gotten together to showcase all things dairy. So in the description box, I'm going to list all the channels. They all have dairy content that they're going to be featuring this month. Each channel is going to have a different day. Some channels get to share a day because there's so many channels participating. And like all great collaborations, there is a prize for participating, and all you have to do is watch the videos and comment on them, and you are entered to win the grand prize. I'll leave all the information that you need to know in the description box below. Thank you so much to Mennonite Farmhouse and the Inquisitive Farm Wife for hosting this collaboration. So at the moment, I am milking 9 dairy goats, some of them large breed and some of them small breed. And right now it takes about 5 days for me to get enough milk in order to do something major with it. So every other time I get about 5 or 6 gallons extra of milk, I will make cheese, and every other time I will make butter. So this is our butter week, and I'm actually working with 6 gallons today. This is much more milk than I've ever had the chance to deal with on cream separating day. I'm super excited about it because it means that I'm going to get quite a lot of cream, which in turn is going to be quite a lot of butter. So remember, we're using goat's milk, and goat's milk is naturally homogeneous, so I do need to use my cream separator. And the cream can't really separate well out of the milk using this machine if you're using cold milk, and so I do need to heat everything up. I just got this really giant pot. This is a really amazing blessing. It's a great thing to have. And I've got a little thermometer here that's gonna beep and let us know when all this milk is up to temperature. And it actually won't take very long. Alrighty, so the milk is all in the pot, and I did crank the temperature of the stove up to high. So in general, you don't really want to do that to dairy. You don't want to risk the milk scalding on the bottom of the pan. I am using a very heavy bottomed pot here, and I am going to be standing here and stirring this constantly as we come up to temperature, which is 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So even though I am heating the milk, I'm not actually heating it up more than the temperature that it came out of the goat. The body temperature of a goat is roughly 102.5, 103 degrees Fahrenheit. So even though we're heating this milk, it is going to remain raw because it's remaining underneath that body temperature. I think you can actually heat it up to about 115 degrees and it's still technically raw because underneath those temperatures, all of the good bacteria and things can remain alive. Which is one of the reasons why if you're going to be making yogurt out of raw milk, they suggest that you pasteurize it first because the good bacteria inside the milk kind of combats the yogurt culture, and you can get not really yogurt out of it. You get something that's pretty tasty, but it's not exactly yogurt. However, this is a butter video. Okay, we're up to temp, and I can only fit about 2 gallons of milk in this top hopper at a time. But once I get this thing going, there's going to be skim coming out of this port here down into this bucket, and the cream is going to come out over here. The way the cream separator works is it spins the milk around in several different plates that are on the inside here, and by the power of centrifuge, I think the cream is probably lighter than the skim, which is why with cow's milk it rises to the top, and so thus the top spout here gets all the cream. I have one of those nice big 8-cup Pyrex little pouring things. I have no idea where it is, so mason jar it is. And as I say always in my kitchen, if you're new to the channel, you probably haven't heard this, but you have to make a mess or it doesn't count. Now that I have the bowl about halfway up, I am going to start the machine. It needs to kind of rev up and get to speed before I allow the milk to drain through. It is a little bit loud. It sounds like a plane taking off, but I need to let it warm up before I let the milk go through. Okay, I can hear that we're up to speed. And what I'm gonna do is turn this little stopper up here, and it's going to slowly let the milk go through the machine. Hear it go in. First the skim's gonna come out, and then the cream. So fresh out of the separator is just about a half gallon of cream, which is great. So I have found that some of my goats don't produce as much butterfat or as creamy of a milk as others. We mainly have two breeds of dairy goats here. We have La Manchas and we have Nigerian dwarfs. And out of the two, I would say that the Nigerian dwarf has the higher butterfat content. I can really tell when we add another Nigerian dwarf into the mix as far as the flavor of the milk and how much cream I'm getting out. Also though, our feed store was out of alfalfa this last week, and so the girls have not had alfalfa this whole week, and usually we get a lot more cream with alfalfa mixed in as well. But I'm still really happy with this. I am going to be actually making the butter tomorrow morning. In my experience, the cream breaks into butter so much easier when it's been thoroughly chilled. But I do have a little bit of entertainment for you here in the meantime. I can hear from indoors that my bottle baby Tori is absolutely starving, so we need to go feed a bottle. Side note too, I don't want to forget to acknowledge that this is a whole bunch of skim milk, and in the past we have made a ton of things using our skim milk. I've actually bottled it back up and put it right back in the fridge, and I've used it in recipes. We've used it for cereal and for fresh drinking and things like that. You can make a lot of things using skim. We just prefer the full fat versions of all of those things, and thankfully we've got a lot of milk coming in. I know I mentioned that it takes about 5 days for me to get enough milk to either make butter or cheese, but that's excess milk. We have our bottle baby Tori who we're about to go see, and we do a whole bunch of other things. Actually, every day I bring in just over 2.5 gallons of milk from our 9 girls, and that's milking once a day. We feel super blessed. So we actually feed all of this skim out to the chickens and the pigs. Where's Tori? You guys want bottles too, don't you? We gotta find Tori. Tori! I've gotta look at my calendar, but I think Tori, she was yelling for a bottle, I promise. But I think she's coming up on 8 weeks, and I've noticed that she's a lot less enthusiastic. This is the midday bottle, and it's actually a lot later than I normally give it. I'm thinking about dropping her midday bottle because I don't think she really needs it. Come here! Tori. Yeah, now you hear me. Come on, Tori, let's go. I know, I've only got 2 hands. You want more? Truthfully, only Tori, the black and white one, the one with a lot more white than this one, only she really needs a bottle. She's the only one in the whole barn without a mama. She does have a mama. Her mama's just on another farm, and so we're bottle feeding her. These other 3, I'm just supplementing. Their mama doesn't have a lot of patience. She's a first-time mom, and I think she's eventually gonna get the hang of it. Maybe not this litter, but hopefully later on. You're done. You're done. Good morning. So our cream is fully chilled and we're going to be getting to making the butter in just a second. But I was also freeze drying milk and I thought it was really appropriate during dairy month to show you what that looks like as well. Look at how dry this is. So as homesteaders, it's kind of par for the course, or at least it's smart to be thinking at least one season ahead with all of the things that you're doing. And this fall, because of some changes that we've made with our dairy goat herd, we're only going to be having very few Nigerian dwarf goats in milk, so we're not going to be getting near the volume of milk that we're having now. And so we're doing a lot of things like making cheese, making the butter and freezing that, but I'm also freeze drying the milk because actually I can rehydrate this milk here and it's going to be just like the day that I freeze dried it, and I might even be able to make things like cheese and butter with it. The reason I say might is I was looking up online, you know, can I cream separate rehydrated freeze-dried milk? And the only information that I can see is information that is based off of store-bought dehydrated milk. I guess most of that is skim milk, and this isn't skim. I just put whole milk straight from our goats straight into the freeze dryer. So in theory, all of the cream, well, not in theory, it is, all of the cream is in this milk. And so in theory, when I rehydrate it, it should act just as normal and I should be able to cream separate, but I don't know for sure. It's an experiment that I'm going to be doing this winter. So I started with about 1.25 gallons of milk, a little bit more, and it looks like when it freeze dries, it shrinks down by about half, which is awesome. So I do plan to use this milk this winter. So I didn't put it in a long-term storage situation like with a Mylar bag and oxygen absorber and things like that. These jars will work just fine. We vacuum sealed them and we're gonna be storing them in a cabinet. All right, so our cream is sufficiently chilled and it's butter time. So I am gonna be using my KitchenAid mixer to whip the cream in order to break the cream into butter and buttermilk. I understand that this is not an option for everyone. I have used butter churns like this. I've actually used this exact butter churn in the past. It's not my favorite thing. It's definitely an elbow buster. If you use something like this, it would be my recommendation not to fill it more than halfway up the paddle. You can also load a regular mason jar about halfway with cream, put the lid on, and shake and shake and shake until you get butter. It's also really labor intensive, but it is an option. And this is also a good time to point out that you definitely don't need a dairy animal in order to make butter at home. If you wanted to make butter just for fun or out of necessity, maybe your store is out of butter but they have tons of heavy whipping cream, you can totally make butter out of that. So the whole idea is that we will be whipping the tar out of this cream until we get something that resembles butter, and then we will actually get butter. I'll show you. So the cream that we get out of our goat's milk is quite thick. It isn't even really pouring out of this jar, which is awesome. There we go. If you have a KitchenAid at home, you know that it does come with a couple different attachments. What we're going to want to use is the bulb whisk. So my KitchenAid bowl here is just less than half full. I don't think I would want to fill it any higher because there is going to be kind of a significant amount of splattering going on, and I want to try to minimize that. It's inevitable though. They do make, and they're pretty cool, and I might get one eventually, but little like actual butter machines, and they're all enclosed. So my lack of patience kicked in and I did end up cranking that up to 10. And at first we did get whipped cream. That's exactly what we had. And we could have stopped it right there if we felt like maybe we wanted to top a pumpkin pie. And then you whip a little bit more and we get this crumbly type cream that you might assume is butter. It actually is like very creamy. It's almost like a frosting type consistency. It does not taste like butter. It tastes like cream still. So don't assume this is butter just because it kind of is spreadable at this point. You might need to scrape down the sides of the bowl in your whisk, but you definitely want to keep whipping. I will likely have to stop and wipe down the sides of the bowl a couple more times before it all comes together or breaks apart. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for the butter and the buttermilk to break. And this is a good time to keep a kitchen towel ready. Okay, you see how it's starting to spit a little bit of liquid? We are not there yet. The process is not done, but we're getting closer. I'm just going to do one more final scrape here. And as much as I would love you to see the actual point of the butter breaking into its butter and buttermilk, I value my camera a lot, so I am going to do what I normally do, and I'm going to cover it at this point. Only a slight mess, not too shabby. Do you see the carnage that's happened behind the machine too? Gracious. Okay, but we officially have what we're looking for, and I will make sure to bring you in close. So what we have here is butter, that's the solid stuff, and that very liquidy stuff, it's more liquidy than milk, that is the buttermilk. So at this point, it's very important that we continue to keep the butter and buttermilk separate. And in order to really make that happen, we actually have to wash the butter, believe it or not. So I'm gonna drip dry what I can. I have impeccably clean hands, plus this butter is for my family. So I'm just gonna reach in here, grab out the butter and move it over to a separate bowl. So I am actually going to collect and culture this buttermilk in order to make things like buttermilk pancakes or my favorite, buttermilk biscuits. I'm just going to strain the butter out. And because I used raw milk in this process and we didn't heat it up beyond what the natural bacteria in the milk can handle, I can actually just put a lid loosely on this and leave it out on the counter, and we will get buttermilk by morning, or cultured buttermilk by morning. So here's our load of butter, and you can tell because of the bowl that I've got it in that the buttermilk is still kind of draining out of it, and that's awesome. I'm actually going to wash it literally in the sink under very cold water, as cold as my tap can go. And you're gonna see me do this, so don't worry, but I'm just gonna knead the butter with my hands inside the bowl and pour out the cloudy water until, while I'm kneading and pouring, I eventually get clear water. That means all of the buttermilk will have been washed out of the butter. So what I'm doing now does look pretty strange, but this is just another way to draw out moisture from the butter. I'm just folding it over and slapping it, really, and it's allowing some of the water that got kind of folded in to the butter as well as the buttermilk to make its way out. It's kind of like tamping a jar on a counter in order to make the contents settle and bubbles rise to the surface. It's a lot like that. Now, I like all of my butter to be salted, and so I'm going to salt it now before I put it up in the freezer. This is definitely going to be something that you're going to want to do to your taste, and start out slow because you can't obviously take the salt out of the butter once you put it in. So in my experience with butter, if I have 1 quart of cream that I start out with, usually that equals about a teaspoon of salt for the batch of butter. So we did 2 quart jars. I'm just gonna start with 1 teaspoon still, mix it in, give it a taste, and see if it needs more. A little bit of moisture is going to continue to come out of the butter while we are mixing, and that's totally fine. We can just dump it out. It does need a little more. So next comes the fun part, the molding. So I actually will store my butter in a couple different ways. I have this really nifty butter mold here, and I'll link it in the description box below. It's not an affiliate link, but every time I show it, people ask, so I figured I'd put it in there in advance. And I like this because it allows me to easily measure out my butter for recipes, like the biscuits I talked about. I think it's either 6 or 8 tablespoons of butter. I think it's 6. And this has the little notches in here that help you tell a tablespoon of butter. But also I will put a whole bunch of different smaller sized jars of butter in my freezer and pull it out to have on the counter. This kind of thing is just really great for dipping your knife in and spreading it on muffins or toast or whatever suits your fancy. With this butter mold, I find that sometimes it's a little hard to get the butter in all of the corners. So I actually start with the corners first and press pretty hard into the corners to try to get them to fill out. It's not a catastrophe if there are little bubbles in it. Isn't that awesome? So I'm just gonna stick this in the freezer, and once these are frozen solid, they'll be really easy to pop out. And then what I like to do is actually use my vacuum seal machine and vacuum seal the butter like this until I need it. The rest of this butter I'm gonna quickly put into little jars, and I'll put those in the freezer too. So here we have our homemade butter. So in my experience, homemade butter doesn't last as long as store-bought butter on the counter. I'm not really sure exactly what the reasoning is, but I do know that if you don't thoroughly wash the buttermilk out of the butter, that can shorten the lifespan of the butter. But the way that we do it, where we keep it in the freezer essentially until we need it, I mean, the butter really has very, very rarely gone bad on the counter. And speaking of going bad, there was a time, I think it was probably 2 years ago, maybe a little bit less, where I had some cream actually go sour in the refrigerator before I could get to it in order to make butter. And I actually made butter out of that sour cream, and it was so good. So it's actually not part of this collaboration, but if you want to see that and really lots of other videos where I make all kinds of things out of our goat's milk, I'm going to leave this playlist up here. But the playlist for this collaboration is going to be down here. Make sure that you go to all the videos this month and make a comment so you get a chance to win a prize.